Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my dream world. Now that I've released all of my reactions of Dragons Rising Season 3, it's about time that we do a full season and a part 2 review. I have decided to mesh the two into one video if you don't mind. So if you haven't already watched those reactions, feel free to check them out. They are not required to see this because I do have some changed opinions since watching it initially. But the reason I decided to take a little bit of extra time with this video, I try to update weekly regarding Ninjago, but it didn't turn out this way for this video. But it's because I did actually have a lot of mixed thoughts about this season before you attack me. I wanted to be sure that I nailed down exactly how I feel and why before I talk about it. I will discuss what I believe to be the strengths, weaknesses, and overall highlights of the season as a whole, what it sets up for next season, and then overall my opinion of the season as a whole, since as you know, we do have a part 1 and a part 2, but at the end of the day, it's still the same season. Since I already did a video for part 1, this is primarily going to focus on part 2, but I'll kind of add a section at the end talking about the season as a whole as well. I also want to add that while my reaction videos, and I touched on this earlier, they were reactions from the initial leaks that occurred with part 2, which was very unfortunate, but I didn't want to get spoiled, so I did go ahead and watch them. I have rewatched the season since to prepare for this video, so some of my opinions when it comes to the reactions have shifted quite a bit and may not reflect in those initial reaction videos. Before I really get into it, I know I've been yapping a lot, but I wanted to say this. I have nothing but respect for the writers of Ninjago. As a writer myself, I know how much work goes into a show like this, and now that we have 15 seasons of the original show, 3 seasons in this spin-off series, and a bunch of other specials, lore, books, video games, comics, etc., that's a lot of lore to handle. But I am the type of person that believes in constructive criticism and explaining your opinions and backing it up. This is just a place for me to filter my honest thoughts about the show, about this season, and about the space. And this is just a place for me to filter my honest thoughts about the show, about this season, and to give you all a space to discuss what you loved, hated, and were straight up confused about regarding the show. But without further ado, I will hop right into this video. I always like to start with the strengths of the season because there are a lot of things that I did really like about this season, especially part 2. If you saw my reactions, you probably heard me saying like, oh my gosh, this is the most hyped I've been. I'm locked in. I didn't even give that much commentary while I was watching because of how hyper-focused I was on this season. So I'll start with saying, I'm just going to kind of bullet point things that I enjoyed. The side plots in general were pretty engaging for the most part, but the one that really stood out to me was the Land of Lee, because I feel like it intertwined really well with what this season was going for. Because while the overall tone, which I'll discuss in a minute, was very dark, having this like very bright, light, kind of 1984 style, everything is awesome theme going on in a very big part of this season was a really interesting dynamic. I also think the Jay and Nia development, both with them as characters and their relationship and dynamics in general, was fantastic here because we got the focus we've been needing from these two for such a long time. And having it be in a key part of the season, like the Land of Lee plot goes from like episode 3 to episode 5, 6, I don't remember exactly, but 5, 6 of this plot. I think that caused it to be one of the most engaging parts of the season for me because that's where I felt that the pacing was the strongest. We got to see that part of the plot and it intertwined well with like Roz and Aaron's plot with Sora and going to the Casket of Bones, making the new Dragon Cores, and everything else that was going on. And I feel like it was structured very well. We got there in a really well-paced way. I do have a few critiques about what went down with some other characters in this part, but overall it was the most engaging part of the season for me personally. So the next thing I want to touch on, which I mentioned briefly, is tone, because there is a very dark tone throughout this season, and I believe that made it very engaging, especially for the first half of it. And the best comparison I can make is that it was kind of like Possession, a season that I personally enjoy. I know not everyone does, but I personally do enjoy that season. But it was on a much larger scale with higher stakes. And I think that made it all the more, oh my gosh, how are we even going to get through this? Because the way things are playing out here, if you don't have a specific weapon or knowledge, you're kind of screwed when it comes to fighting off the soul sucking aspect of this season. And that makes it pretty dark and high stakes. And with all of the souls that are being collected giving Thunderfang strength, that's all the more reason that our protagonists are feeling the heat throughout this part of the show. So I'm personally a fan of darker seasons, so I really liked the kind of ghostly aspect of it, the idea that, chaos will reign if we do not fix this. So I did find myself very strongly engaged, because I think if you saw my reaction video, I said, oh my gosh, this is the most engaged I've been for, I know it's not technically a season premiere, but for an opening episode of a new plot in a really long time for this show. Now, the next strength I want to talk about is a specific character, and that is Jay. I could make a whole separate video about how Dragons Rising did wonders for Jay's characters, but people have already done that. So I'm not going to do that. I'm simply going to state how I felt and feel about Jay's character in general. I'm going to be honest, I absolutely adore all of the ninja. If you guys have watched my videos, you know that I love all of them genuinely. However, Jay is one that I have not been connecting to very much. Like, I haven't been invested in his character like this since season 6, Skybound, which is a fan favorite season, which I also talked about on my channel. But, some people are like, yeah, they made Jay a joke, but in all seriousness, he has not had that level of character development since season 6, which is over 10 seasons ago? I know we had season 12, Prime Empire, but I don't feel like that was a great season for his character. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't the type of character development that we needed from him at the time, especially because in season 11 onward, it especially started to become apparent that the writers weren't really taking Jay's character into account. Because when we're introduced to him, I'm going all the way back to pilots in season 1, by the way, when I'm saying this. Jay is, he's a little goofy and funny, and he makes jokes, but he's also very crafty. And he's an inventor. He's creative. He might not be, the highest in terms of, dominant IQ, but he was the first one to unlock Spinjitzu. He was the first one to put that lesson together. He, made the bounty fly. Are y'all remembering that? This man is smart. He might not be Zane level smart. He might not be quite as gadgety as Nia is, but he's a smart character. And I feel like, unfortunately, in season 11, we lost that from there on out. I think what Dragons Rising did for Jay was brilliant. I've been kind of split about the way the main 4, Nia and Lloyd, have been handled in Dragons Rising. However, Jay is one where I think the wait for his character was 100% worth it, because this season, and especially part 2, did wonders for him. This is the best his character has ever been. I will state it strongly here. I love the way I think him getting brainwashed really allowed him to start at a clean slate after all of the mess that happened in season 11 onwards. I'm not a Wild Rain hater, by the way, but I'm very critical of the way Jay has been handled. And I just feel like it was a whole new him, still with elements of who the Jay we all know and love with sprinkled in. It's kind of his bad boy era. It's more of an anti-hero era for him. He's not a full throw-out villain. He's more of a vigilante anti-hero where he's a lone wolf. He's like, I am doing what I have to do to pay the bills. I am kicking butt while doing it, by the way, because he in battle was extremely I can't even talk. Extremely impressive. I mean, he took down Zarked when Kai and Nia were struggling during that whole circumstance. And he, was blunt and sarcastic, so still with that kind of comedic element that Jay has always had, but in a more serious tone. And by the way, out of all of the characters, despite him not being committed to the team, he was the one that was locked in on the mission almost 100%. More so even than the people that are stringing him along on the mission in the first place. Like, this man was locked in. He almost made no fumbles, and when he did, he had a quick solution for them, and he was, he was kind of carrying the team, even though he claimed so loudly, like, I am not part of this team, I am not a ninja, and I have no interest in being a part of your team, and yet he was sometimes carrying the team on his back, because everybody else was like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this, and he was like, I have a way, I'm gonna do it. And it just made his character so satisfying to watch. I went on a full rant there, but yes, I love Jay this season. Now, another character that I want to touch on before I move on to critiques is Roz. Come on, y'all. I'm going to be real, though, because at the beginning of, season 1, season 2, I was not fully on the Roz train. And it's not because I didn't think his writing was good. It was mostly because I was like, man, this dude needs to rely on puppet mastering everyone to actually get things done. He's actually not that strong. Of course, he's stronger than Eren and Sora because they're beginners, but I wasn't really impressed with him power-wise. I was more impressed with him IQ-wise. However, this season, his threat level went up astronomically. He was cold as ice throughout this season, and he has another Source icon now, and he almost got it in the most brutal way possible. Now, some users have pointed out that the way he did end up getting the Source Dragon icon was a little bit underwhelming and lackluster. However, once he obtained it, this character just was ready to just bust through everything. I really wish, and the one complaint I have is I really wish he got a showdown with one of the ninja. I really wish he did, so that we could actively, because yes, he beats Rontu. That's where I was like, okay, now his threat level is insane, because her face changing from I'm about to whoop you versus oh no, I'm not gonna win this fight, and she didn't win that fight. Seeing that was so satisfying. Yeah, he beat Geo, he beat Frohiki. Those aren't really fighter characters, but beating Rontu, who with Egalt defeated the Forbidden Five, and him dropping lines like "Bend my greetings to Egalt." Woo! Yeah, threat level astronomical, very engaging villain, and he, already was by far the most developed and well-written villain of Dragon's Rising, period. I'll get into that later, but this season, it was taken to a whole nother level, and he even had his fair share of lighthearted moments too at the beginning, and with his banter with Sora I really enjoyed. But yeah, I am fully on the Roz hype train now. Oh, so much so that my voice almost gave out. That I'm really excited to see what he's gonna do in season 4. Now I'm gonna touch on what I wasn't feeling as much, and again, this is just my opinion. Maybe I didn't connect to it, maybe I found there were some flaws in the writing. I don't know, but this is just a place for me to say, this is some things that I did not love about this season. Not necessarily even weaknesses, just critiques. So I'm going to start with one that may sound a little contradictory at first, but that is going to be Eren's character. Because if you saw my part 1 video, you would have heard that Eren's character and the way it was handled was actually one of my favorite parts of the first half of this season. However, I think a lot of that development unfortunately fell flat for me in part 2, especially after the Casket of Bones, which is episode 4, kind of mid-season-ish. I thought in part 1, the way he learned to, harness his abilities and the way he defeated Thunderfang after connecting all the dots was very well done and satisfying to watch, but this time, it was kind of like deja vu, but even less satisfying. Because I will note that I did like that Lloyd realizing that sometimes as a leader, you need to be a follower for your plan to succeed. So the way they handled fusing with the Arc Dragon of Focus in the end with Lloyd actually following Aaron's lead instead, that's a concept that I really enjoy. However, Aaron's entire I'm not a ninja anymore just felt so weird to me because, dude, now is not the time to be wallowing and anxious, moping around when the stakes are this high. Because even in part one, he was saying, like, yeah, you know what? I might have been off with Roz, but the stakes are high right now, so I'm going to reunite with the team. This one, it kind of felt like he was just like, yeah, I don't want to mess anything up, you know? Like, after everything you did in part one, that's what you're worried about? Dude, come on, I need you to lock in. And because of that, his dynamic with Lloyd fell flat to me. And also, his parents should have stayed dead. Or like, there should have been some way to like separate them again or filter them out because it just felt like Aaron's character being all wallowy after reuniting with his parents just did not feel correct to me. Like, you either had to have him lose his parents and be completely devoid of hope after that, but then that also gets rid of his entire arc with Sora of him being like, you're my family now. You're the one who's been here for me after I lost my parents, and so now we gotta stick together, and that eventually leads him back to the ninja and reignites his hope and strength. It just felt like after what we did in part one with episodes like Crashing Together and episode 10 initially defeating Thunderfang, I just don't feel like the way Aaron's character played out this half of the season worked well for him at all. Yeah, unfortunately, his character fell flat for me because a lot of people have complained like Aaron's selfish, he's annoying, he's whiny, and yeah, he is, but I feel like in a lot of the other parts of the show, that's made him interesting because it's caused him to make strong choices, but here it just fell flat, and he did just kind of feel like he was whining the whole time, and that made him annoying because, Aaron, I have defended you. I have used a lot of energy defending your character, and now you're making me regret it. So unfortunately, that ends up being a pretty big critique for me for this second half of the season. The next character I want to touch on, and this is going to be very brief because I don't want to talk about this character that much, is Thunderfang. Wasted, little to no development, unsatisfactory defeat. I have heard so many people talk about this on other videos, so I'm kind of going to leave it at this because I'm going to touch on Thunderfang's defeat a little bit more in the next part of my critique. Because, funnily enough, I was actually initially going to put the pacing of this part of the season as a strength because I had a huge problem actually with the pacing in part one, and I acknowledged it in my first video, but I thought the structure for this part was much more engaging and easier to follow. And, you saw in my reaction videos, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so locked in, I'm so hyped, and it was mostly because of the Land of Lee, Roz, Aaron, and Sora's side plot. However, they dropped the bomb at the end by spending so much time on Rapton. I'm a Rapton hater. Again, my reaction videos, I've been very vocally anti-Rapton, so I might kind of be a little bit biased, but there was no reason for him to take up that much time in the penultimate episode of the season. And it caused the finale to feel extremely rushed when I feel like there could have been a lot more dynamic in how Thunderfang actually was going to be defeated, because a lot of people have pointed out he supposedly should have gained a lot of strength after like sucking up all these souls, and the Archdragon of Focus was basically dead, and then it's like revived and everything, and then Thunderfang just ends up being defeated by the Archdragon Focus yet again, and not really in a special way at all. And combined with the poor pacing, it just felt extremely unsatisfying for me and caused the finale, because I was so excited for this finale. I was like, this is actually so far, like up until episode 8 was my favorite part of Dragon's Rising, and now it's kind of unfortunately dropped to one of my least favorites simply because of how the ending was handled after all of this buildup. So that does point to a huge problem in the pacing and also with the lack of focus and filler, because this was a problem for part 1 too. For a season that is so focused on focus, there was a pretty big lack of it, unfortunately. And this kind of like wasn't as big of a problem in part two up until certain key moments. And that unfortunately messes with the pacing and the overall like tying our season together. So, yeah, the finale, this all kind of just muddles down to the finale. Unfortunately, other than what I'm going to talk about in just a second, I found the finale extremely disappointing. I didn't love the way Thunderfang was defeated. I didn't love the way Aaron's character was handled. I thought Rapton took up way too much screen time where there could have been more development about how to defeat Thunderfang. Maybe we could have had the Arc Dragon of Focus actually fail or become critically injured, forcing Lloyd and Aaron to step in and forcing the other ninja to step in and having to harness their connection, Lloyd especially, because we've seen him connect to dragons before. I think it could have been very interesting if that took place or if something more structured was able to happen other than, it basically being a deja vu of what happened initially to Thunderfang. But because of that, it did kind of feel like there was a little bit of lack of originality and because throughout the season there were such high stakes, it just kind of was like, oh, okay, what's next? And with that, I dive into the anticipation and setup of next season, because this was interesting, and this keeps the finale from being a complete disappointment for me, because that cliffhanger opened up a whole new can of worms that I'm very interested in seeing how it pans out. So let's just go over it real quick. We have Lloyd and Aaron, they're together in an unknown area. We have Kai, Jay, and Nia in an unknown area, which, some people are speculating that it's the land of monsters, which, oof, but after what we've seen of Jay's character with Nia and even his little interactions and dynamic with Kai at the end there, that trio has me extremely hyped. They're gonna eat. I'm so excited for them. Now, and then we have Cole at the monastery alone without any of the rest of the team. He's just with the finders and also has not found Geo, so yikes. And Zane is off with Pixel. Roz has Wu trapped, and the Source Dragons are no longer united, which has caused everyone's elemental powers to be all jacked up. That is a lot to both think about and speculate about when it comes to what's going to actually happen in season 4. Not to mention, this is a cool detail that somebody pointed out. The 3 Source Dragons that kind of remained united in the council were Energy, Motion, and Flow, which are, the Source Dragons of Kai, Jay, and Nia's elements, while Life, Focus, and Strength separated, who are the sources of Cole, Lloyd, and Zane's elements, all of whom are separated now and are kind of on their own. That's crazy to me. So even though I did kind of have my issues with this season and the way it wrapped up, I am tentatively very, very hyped for what we're going to get to in season 4, because there's so much open to explore, and I think this gives all of our main cast and our new cast opportunities to potentially be poked around with. So I am hyped. My overall opinion of part 2, I struggled with it, and that's why it took me so long to even attempt to make this video, because my thoughts have been so jumbled about this. But my overall opinion of part 2 is that I enjoyed it for the most part, but I feel like the ending was very, the ending of the actual season was kind of disappointing to me. The cliffhanger, I'm almost considering this a preview for season 4 rather than the finale of season 3. So because of that, the preview of what we're about to see next had me hyped. The way certain characters, Jay and Roz, were handled, excellent. The way that other characters were handled, not so much. So there were things that I genuinely think that there are so many parts of part 2 that I really, really enjoyed, but there were some key weaknesses that is causing me to struggle to fully enjoy the season, because there's so much good, but there's like little splotches of things that I don't like that are causing me to be like, oh, like I'm just, oh, like a little underwhelmed. And, that's why, like, in a ranking this season, I would struggle a lot where to place it, because it's like, am I ranking based off enjoyment? Am I ranking based off of flaws? So, yeah, stay tuned for my entire season rewatch, because I'm still struggling of where I would kind of rate this season. But amongst Dragon's Rising seasons, unfortunately, and I'm going to get into this a little bit, um, for my full season recap, it does, I think, land last for me. I might have to rewatch season 1 to say that for sure, but season 2 is definitely better. And I remember being much more satisfied with season 1 as a whole. So, we'll revisit this soon, but that's kind of how I feel after part 2. As for the full season, like if we're talking full part 1, full part 2, together, no splits, it's the same season, because it is. I am just going to spitfire this because I've already touched on most of this. I don't love the villains. I hated the way the Forbidden Five were handled. I already talked about that in part 1, so I'm not even going to go into that. But other than Roz and Lee, I did not like the antagonists of this season. And I don't count Jay. Jay is more of an anti-hero for me. I dislike the handling of a lot of characters that are kind of like side characters. Like they're like Cole, Zane, and Wildfire are the biggest examples of this. Unfortunately, I think that Dragon's Rising struggles with having such a big cast that, they're introducing all these characters that have potential and have super cool elements to them. Another example of this when it comes to side characters would be Geo. These characters, have a cool start or have something really neat about them and I want to learn more, but they get pushed to the side or are unfinished or have unsatisfying plots because, we do want to focus on the main plot, but then it's like, wait, but something was being set up with this one and now where is it going? A huge example of this, and I'm going to go into more depth about it when in my next few videos that I'm going to make, but the prime example of this is Cole's Screaming Earth plot. This was a plot that was set up in the second half of season 1, which, mind you, is 2 seasons, aka 2 years ago. And when we finally circled back to it, it ended up not even being a Cole solo side plot like it was implied to be, causing it to feel massively disappointing. And no, I'm not just saying this as a Cole stan. Point is, it's okay for a character like Cole to take a back seat, but it needs to be consistent. Don't give him a potential, like, eye-opening side plot just for it to be very briefly touched on in season 2 and then completely ignored until the second part of season 3, where he was kind of just like, yeah, I showed up where I was supposed to, but yeah, I couldn't do anything about it. Oh well, forget it. Really? It just like bombs seriously dropped there. And unfortunately, I think that's happened with multiple other characters too. Like Zane was implied to be having more character development, but it was really just him dying again and then turning big. So making him more of a robot when his character is supposed to be so human despite not being human. Like, we're circling back to season 1 here. We've unfortunately lost the plot with multiple characters. Wildfire's another one. I like Frack, but he's starting to kind of fall into that category for me too. But, it's happened to too many characters at this point. So, and it's been glaringly apparent in season 3, unfortunately. I also wish there was more continuation from what we saw in season 2. This might be a hot take, but I'm actually quite critical of Dragon's Rising season 2 as well, which is generally considered to be the best season of Dragon's Rising so far. I do agree with that. But season 2, one thing that I really loved about it is that it introduced so many, like, relatable and fleshed out themes like Lloyd's mental health and visions that he's suffering from. Suddenly, this almost becomes completely irrelevant after having so much weight previously, when I think there was still so much to be explored, like maybe Lloyd's learned to handle it a little bit better, but he's still receiving these visions and it's helping move along the plot. That's something that was seriously missing for me here, but I feel like I've been super negative lately. So again, I enjoyed what they did with Roz and Jay, and I also really enjoyed how they handled Aaron and Sora's relationship, specifically in part 1. So all of this leaves me tentatively excited for season 4. Like, yes, I want to be like super hyped, but after, I was super hyped for season 3, and then the Forbidden 5 ended up being irrelevant and I ended up being underwhelmed. I'm a little bit more tentative about it this time, but I still think that season 4 has so many routes that it could go, which makes me anticipate it more, because I'm like, ooh, what's actually going to happen? Like, how much of these speculations we're making are going to be correct? How much is going to be unexpected? How much is going to be satisfying? And I'm here for it. So I always like to kind of, before I close out the video, talk about my highlights of the season. So that's like favorites, least favorites, things I want to note. So my favorite characters, I think I've made it pretty clear at this point, were Roz and Jay. By far. And I would say if I had to pick one favorite, it would be Jay, 100%. And my favorite episode, specifically a part 2, I couldn't decide between you and Lee and Casket of Bones, because that's where I feel like my anticipation was at its highest and the show was at its most engaging and consistent of this season, or at least that part of the season. And then my least favorite episode of part 2 was When Doves Cry, because while we had such a brilliant scene with like the Archdragon of Focus being summoned and everything, Rapton ruined it. Yes, I'm a Rapton hater, you're gonna have to deal with it. And I guess like now with the season as a whole, I wanted to say that's part 2, but as a whole, I think my favorite episode of season 3 was Crashing Together, because it just really was perfect for Aaron and Sora's relationship for me. And my least favorite episode of season 3 is the Great Zane Robbery, because of how it handled Zane. And that's a whole nother video, so I will get into that later. But yeah, that's all I have for you about this season. I may have seemed very critical of this season, but I still had a fun time with it. I love this show. I love these characters. So I do have a lot of thoughts about them, and that's why sometimes I might sound a little bit more critical or even meaner than I want to when it comes to discussing a season that I have mixed feelings about. But that being said, my next 2 Ninjago videos are going to be discussing 2 characters in this series that I believe could have been handled better and why. So they might not come out within the next week or so, because I really want to take my time with these 2 videos. And after that, I'll be binging the entire series through and through to prepare myself for season 4, and then I'll come back and rank all of them for you. I'm also planning on uploading to my casual channel more within the next few weeks, so that's where I put my gaming, my rankings, and my edit videos, basically videos that I want to do, but I don't want to muddle the content of my main channel here. So if that's kind of your thing, totally go and subscribe over there too. I'm covering the current season of Dancing with the Stars here, so if that's your thing, feel free to tune in. It usually comes out on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on my schedule. I've been yapping a lot. So if you made it this far, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all next time. Bye!